I imagine we're going to have more people joining us today. This is a big conversation we're going to be having about teaching evaluations. Hi, everyone. I'm Don Saucier. I'm the Faculty Associate Director of the Teaching and Learning Center. And we're going to begin today's session with a land acknowledgement.
Okay. Okay, let's see. All right, can you see my screen, Don?
Yes.
Okay, great. Here we go.
As the first land grant institution established under the 1862 Morrill Act, we acknowledge that the state of Kansas is, historically, home to many native nations, including the Kaw, Osage, and Pawnee, among others. Furthermore, Kansas is the current home to 4 federally recognized native nations: the Prairie Band Potawatomi, the Kickapoo Tribe of Kansas, the Iowa Tribe of Kansas and Nebraska, and the Sac and Fox Nation of Missouri in Kansas and Nebraska.
Many native nations utilize the western plains of Kansas as their hunting grounds, and others, such as the Delaware, were moved through this region during Indian removal efforts to make way for white settlers. It's important to acknowledge this, since the land that serves as the foundation of this institution was, and still is, stolen land.
We remember these truths because K-State's status as a land-grant institution is a story that exists within ongoing settler colonialism and rests on the dispossession of indigenous peoples and nations from their lands. These truths are often invisible to many. The recognition that K-State's history begins and continues through indigenous contexts is essential.
Please remember
these truths
because we still remember.
Thank you. You have found your way to the Teaching and Learning Center's Professional Development Series. We meet on Wednesdays at noon in real time over Zoom, as you're aware of now. But we also record our events and archive them for asynchronous viewing on our website. So if you know anyone who's going to be interested in today's event and they want to watch it later, that'll be a possibility for them. Next week, we're going to have an assessment follow-up with our colleagues from the assessment office, Fred Burak. He's going to ideally bring in some people who are going to share their assessment successes in terms of how they have found ways to show that their classes are teaching students what they should be learning. So we're very excited about that event for next week. Remember, if you attend enough of these events, you can potentially earn a professional development certificate, and my colleagues have dropped that note into the chat to find out more information on that. We have those certificates available for graduate teaching assistants as well as for faculty and staff. And also, if you're a faculty member looking to be a TLC fellow, we have information about how you can do that. So today's presenter is me, and I'm going to talk to you about teaching evaluations. I've called today's event Teaching Evaluations 101 because we're going to kind of go ground up. We're going to tell you what they are, why we use them, and all of those kinds of things. And I'm going to begin by sharing my screen, which probably takes me no less than about 45 seconds. All right, Ashley, are we seeing what people should be seeing?
It's loading right now.
It's loading, okay.
Is everyone else still seeing the Don Saucier started screen sharing? Okay, I'm seeing some nods too.
While we're waiting, one of the things I want to kind of put out today is that I'm going to be asking for some of your feedback on what you think about TEVALs. And TEVALs is what K-State calls our teaching evaluations. And that may actually be a bit of a misnomer for reasons that we're going to be talking about as we go forward. But while we're sitting here for a second waiting for this to load, I want you to think about the good and the bad of your experiences with student evaluations of your teaching. It hasn't loaded yet?
Mm-mm.
I'm going to stop my share and try again. And now it's just freezing up on me. All right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the chat for a little bit until we can figure out how to get these slides to show. And the first question that I have for you is I want you to describe TEVALs in one word. And we're going to do waterfall chat. So you're going to wait a second before you hit enter. So I want you to describe TEVALs in one word. All right, please hit enter. All right, someone said lackluster. Someone else said generic. Someone else said discriminatory. Someone else said intimidating. Someone else said anxiety provoking. Someone else said informative-ish. Someone else said helpful. Someone else said feedback. And someone else also said generic. Okay, so we have, someone else said paradoxical. All right, so we have some kind of mixed reactions to TEVALs kind of going on here. So now we're going to do, I'm going to ask you to take the mix and we're going to go one side and then the other. So I want you to tell me a good thing about TEVALs. And again, wait just a second and I'll tell you when to drop that in. All right, why don't we go ahead and drop those in? All right, so good things. We got individual comments that they provide us with information about how our students perceive our class. We said if our students are our customers, then we're getting customer satisfaction survey data. Someone says they show students' perception of the class with their comments. We've got accountability, found out places that need work, helpful for constructive feedback. Feedback is helpful on good questions. And someone said sometimes students don't express positive things for fear of seeing us kissing up. So we get to see those comments that we wouldn't otherwise. All right, so there might be some good things coming out from TEVALs, but we're also aware of the bad. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn it around and to say, what's a bad thing about TEVAL? Again, wait a couple seconds before I tell you to drop that into the chat. All right, let's hit enter.
Did we lose him? Okay. I imagine he's probably rebooting his Zoom, but
Hi, everyone. Apparently the internet is not my friend today. So I am I am back. Ashley, I don't have the negative comments because apparently I was kicked off. Would you be willing to read
Okay.
those out loud for me?
Yes, I almost started doing that anyway, but I can
Thank
actually do
you.
that. Yeah, so some of the the negative sides of feed or TEVALs is sometimes students don't express positive things for fear of being seen as kissing up, or we can see those comments, or we get to see comments that we wouldn't otherwise. Numerical ranking, anonymity in the age of social media means that we are used to writing things without a filter and forget that there's a human on the other end. Natalie said questions do not show the whole student experience and they're used for comparison to others. Ted said sometimes include feedback that are not helpful for improving the course. For example, comments about instructor appearance, complaints about having to read to succeed. Clarissa said TEVALs are used for a lot of things that are not appropriate at the university. For instance, in our college for teaching awards. Cynthia said they're vague. Jack said they can be easily misinterpreted without context. Noah said students may use them as an opportunity to disparage their instructors. And Melissa said students are very tired at the end of the semester and don't often put time or effort into the comments like we wish.
Okay, so we definitely are picking up on some of the limitation of TEVALs. And is my screen now appropriately shared?
No, it still looks like it's loading. If you want, you can like email me the slides and I can do the screen share.
All right, we will do that real quick.
Okay.
I apologize so much, y'all. This is weird. Sorry, let's take me just 1 second. All right, Ash, you should have that ideally here in a second. And then we'll go from there. So what we're going to be talking about and my objectives for today, I'm going to tell you about what TEVALs are and what they're not. I'm going to talk to you about why we use them and how we should be using them. I'm also going to tell you how we should not be using TEVALs. And we're going to talk about how we can best get TEVALs to be productive in helping us to teach our classes.
Okay, Don, it looks like your screen actually finally shared.
It actually shared?
Yes. So
are we seeing?
Yeah,
it?
if you're on the My Objectives Today slide, you're good.
All right, fantastic. All
I
right.
guess we just had to.
So we're going to be having a conversation eventually, but now we're here and here we go. And this is awesome. So we're going to be talking about a lot of things related to TEVALs. There's a lot of resources that you can check out while you're trying to put these things together. The TLC has a web page devoted to this. Lots of resources we have there to kind of help you out. The University Handbook provides some guidance about teaching evaluations, and I'm going to provide some overview of some of the more relevant University Handbook sections and what they have to say about teaching evaluations. And also our Engage the Sage YouTube channel, we have a number of videos related to this. And our video last week is about a 13-minute summary of a lot of the things that I'm going to say for you today in terms of a general overview about what teaching evaluations are. So we had words all over the place to describe what we thought about TEVALs. We saw some negative things. We saw some positive things. So what I want to do is I want to give us an overview, knowing those emotions that we all have in mind, those preconceptions about TEVALs, those experiences we have with TEVALs, to hopefully make these a little bit more productive. So what TEVALs are? First of all, TEVAL is kind of a weird acronym for teaching evaluation here at K-State. It's the name of the instrument that we use. TEVALs is K-State's versions of student evaluations of teaching. You'll see this called SETs in the literature on pedagogy. And the reason that teaching evaluations is a bit of a misnomer is it's not really an evaluation of your teaching. It's student perception data. Those are not the same thing. And it's important that we realize that. So TEVALs are not direct measures of teaching effectiveness or of teaching excellence. So it's what students thought about your class. It's what students are willing to say on that instrument about their class. So it's not really how well you did as a teacher. I am not saying it's not information. It is information, but it's not necessarily the information that we think it is. TEVALs are also not the only metric that can or should be used to evaluate teachers. One of the things that I see a lot at this university, I know that happens at others as well, is people will often use TEVALs or whatever the university uses as their TEVAL instrument to be almost the sole indicator about how someone is as a teacher. That is completely inappropriate. It is also important to note that TEVALs are not objective and they are not free of bias. Students can really put whatever they want and they can base those ratings on really whatever they want. It is more akin to a customer satisfaction rating than it is to a direct assessment of people's teaching effectiveness or teaching excellence. So understanding that these are not necessarily what people use them for is going to be really important. So some of you may be saying, well, why do we use these things at all? Well, it is information. It's just not the information we sometimes think it is. Now, TEVALs are standardized forms of anonymous student feedback in every course they take. So at K-State, you're supposed to administer a TEVAL or a similar instrument in every course that you teach, and it should be done anonymously. Your students should not have any identifiers attached to the instrument that they complete. So from the university handbook, this is in the section on student feedback and classroom instruction. And I've highlighted some relevant parts, but I have a lot more of the text here. But basically what this says is that we have to have student effectiveness be part of our evaluation as teachers. And student feedback on classroom instruction is an important source in evaluating teaching effectiveness. It does not say it's the only source. And in fact, later it's going to say it can't be the only source, but it is one source of feedback about students' experiences in class. The handbook goes on to say that the form should contain instructions, how it's used, etc., but it should be administered and collected under controls conditions that assure students' anonymity. We can't ask students to sign their TEVALs. We can't ask students to put their names on their TEVALs. So they have to be able to do this with anonymous protections. Now, those anonymous protections allow for bad behavior. I completely understand that. But according to the handbook and according to the way that this works in higher education, this is an anonymous form of feedback. We also have in the university handbook that faculty shall collect student feedback for each course and section they teach. I know that when I got here, and I've been here since 2004, when I got here, the way that the rules were is if you were a tenured professor in my department, you only had to evaluate one of your 4 courses a year. People generally teach a 2 and 2 load in my department, some a little bit more, some a little bit less. You only had to collect one, but if you were an assistant professor and had tenure, you had to collect it on all the courses that you taught. And then what happened is that became very asymmetric in evaluations for merit raises when we used to have those and those kinds of things. So since then, the university handbook has changed to say that every faculty member, and this includes anyone teaching, so GTAs, et cetera, any person who's teaching a class has to evaluate every course that they teach. There are exceptions, though, for individualized courses. So if you're teaching a one-on-one course, if you're teaching a graduate course like 999 or something like that, there's only a couple of students, then they realize that the anonymity that might be compromised in those situations, and there might be another form of feedback that is used in those classes, and they point you kind of to your department to provide guidance for how to evaluate those classes. But if you're teaching a class with kind of a substantial number of people in them, and substantial might be, say, I don't even know what that number would be, but you're going to be evaluating, you're going to be collecting student feedback in the classes that you teach as a mandatory aspect of teaching here at K-State. Now, how we set them up, I'm going to go over some of the mechanics before we get philosophical. How we set them up, we do them all online now. Someone told me the other day that someone still has like a stash of paper copies. I'm not even sure what they would do with those anymore, because we're not scanning those and providing those reports for the paper copies anymore. But all of the TEVALs are done online and they're done through Canvas. What you would do is if you go into your Canvas and you click Account in the upper left, you click Account, you click TEVAL, and then you click +, New TEVAL. And it'll take you to the setup screen to be able to do this. And I think this is Tucker Jones, the staff member, Tucker Jones leading you through this process step by step. So you can see that portal in Canvas to set up your TEVALs. Now, when you go into that portal, there's some information you're going to want to have ready. So first of all, you're going to want to have the dates your TEVALs are available. And these should be administered at or near the end of your course. In my opinion, it is completely inappropriate to be evaluating your course before the class is almost over, because otherwise I'm not sure what the students are actually evaluating. We actually have reports of people doing their TEVAL at the midsemester point. I would say that That's something you want to be toward the end of your class. I will caution that for someone who's done this for a long time, doing it during duration. I would recommend the next to the last what they have exposure to your classroom techniques, they have exposure to your assignments, they've completed the vast majority of the assessments. So then they can read things. If you wait until finals week, it's been my experience that you get to be losing. And
Poor guy. He's gonna be so stressed out.
I might try and turn my
am
camera
I back?
off. I don't.
Can you hear me
Yes.
again?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right. I'm gonna try to share that screen again. Wow, this is weird. Did it share right?
Not yet.
Not yet. All right. I'm gonna keep talking, and ideally it'll share. If it doesn't, we'll provide, and even if it does, we'll provide the slides after. Maybe we can link this up. But this has been a little challenging. One of the things I teach my students is we got to have contingency plans for tech failing and things like that. So I'm about to become ideally super engaging with my voiceover of the slides you can't see. So what will happen is you're going to want to know when the dates your TEVALs are going to be available. When are they going to get it to open, and when is it going to close? TEVALs are going to open when you set them to open. And again, I recommend maybe the last week of class, maybe the week before the last week of class, and they can close no later than when the grading deadline closes. Because what will happen is instructors will be able to access their TEVALs the morning after the grading period ends. So usually that's the Tuesday after finals week. On Wednesday morning, your online TEVAL report will be waiting for you. You're going to want to set the dates for your reminder email. So what will happen is the TEVAL, the day it goes out, they will get an email every morning. It looks like spam. I highly recommend you tell your students it's coming. Tell them, it's going to come from a different source. It's going to look like spam, but there's going to be a link in there to do the TEVAL. You're also going to have the opportunity to set up 2 reminder dates. And typically those be, I don't know, a few days later, a week later, or something like that. The reminder dates that you'll want to have kind of picked out when you go in to set up your online TEVAL. You will also have the opportunity to set the text for your first electronic invitation message. The default information message, and they'll show you what it looks like in the online portal, is not helpful. It really just basically there's no magic. I think having something a little bit more is going to be. You also set messages. So one of the things that I do is I have a Word document with this information from classes, and I upload that Word document with all of the information before.
I think you're muted, Don. Don, I think you're muted.
All right. You can set up additional items in your TEVAL as well, and you will want to have these written out ahead of time. You can have rating scale items where people are going to report on that same scale that people use for TEVALs, that same 5-point Likert type scale. And I'll give some example of those in a little bit. You can also have free response items where you can just provide an open field for your students to type into. What is a little bit annoying about the online portal is you will have to have instructions for the completion of each of your items. The rating scale items you can do in sets, But for the free response items, you have to have instructions for completion for every single item. So typically that'll be something like, please complete the question below honestly, or something like that. But you will have to, I copy and paste from that Word document. You will have to put the instructions for each of your free response items in there. There's also something called the FIF, and the FIF stands for the Faculty Information Form. The Faculty Information Form is basically a survey of what your semester has sort of been like. And what this is basically going to do is it's going to allow you to provide context for what your TEVALs are basically going to be reflecting. So you might put that you taught this in a high flex modality for the first time ever. You might put that this is a flipped classroom. You might point that there were a number of academic integrity issues in your class that you had to deal with. And what this will mean is that when the official TEVAL report comes out, that will be connected to your official online TEVAL report to provide some context. So I highly recommend that you put anything kind of unusual and noteworthy in that faculty information form to help you contextualize your TEVALs later. Now, TEVALs are formative, but not summative. And what that means is that these are helping us get to where we want to be as teachers. It is not the end-all, be-all evaluation of our essence as teachers. And that is something I think that we've got to be aware of. And Ashley has put the PowerPoint into the chat so you can kind of follow along with me. Thank you so much, Ashley. So we want to be using these to be constructive in making us improve our teaching from semester to semester. It's not who you are. That number on that page, and a lot of people boil TEVALs down to the instructor effectiveness rating. It's the first value you get back in the online TEVAL report. A lot of people kind of boil their teaching down to that number. I discourage that. That's not something I recommend that we can be doing. I do think, though, that TEVALs are useful. They provide data that help us inform our teaching. It's student perception data. It has to be taken, as information that you then critique and decide how you want to use it. But it is not something to be completely dismissed. I know there are some people who think they're completely valueless. I have colleagues who say, I don't even look at my TEVALs. I don't think that's a good use of TEVALs. I think that we have to look at them with the limitations and use them to help us teach. And there are huge bias potential in the TEVALs. There's two big domains of bias potential I want us to be aware of. One is instructor demographics. As with almost any other domain, there is the possibility for biases, prejudices, microaggressions, macroaggressions to kind of show up in the TEVAL comments and the TEVAL ratings. So if you're from an underrepresented group or different than your students in some demographic way, there is absolutely the potential for them to express that in their ratings and in their qualitative comments. The other potential bias in TEVALs is that some people think that they're the fairest way to compare teachers. I don't think they necessarily are, because teachers are different themselves, but they're also teaching different classes and different disciplines. So to compare someone who's teaching an upper level, 700 level seminar with 5 people, where they, kind of read and talk and all of that, might be different than a 400 person introductory class that's taught as a service for a lot of people who don't want to be in that major. So the course demographics, the size of the class, the audience in that class, those are things that also have to be taken into context when we're interpreting TEVALs, because they can bias the responses that people can make. We should not, I'm going to say this twice, we should not use TEVALs as the only metric in evaluating instructors, and we should not use it as the most important metric in evaluating instructors. It is student perception data. It's people providing their belief in what their experience in their class was like. It is not necessarily how well you taught, and it is not necessarily how much they learned. Those are different things. So when we're talking promotion, tenure, merit evaluations, those documents that your departments have should specify that TEVALs will be included, but will not be the only thing that is used in the evaluation of teaching. I am well aware that across this university, people are in violation of those practices. So this is something that we have to be attentive to when we're being evaluated and when we're evaluating our colleagues. We have a number of Engage the Sage resources that you can kind of check out for other ways to demonstrate your teaching excellence beyond student perception data. There's lots of other ways to do this, and I want us to get used to marketing ourselves and our teaching excellence in all the ways that we can and all the opportunities that we have. Now, from the University Handbook, and I'm quoting now, student feedback should never be the only source of information about classroom teaching. Again, I'm going to say that again. I'm quoting from our handbook. Student feedback should never be the only source of information about classroom teaching. Departments and units should be encouraged to develop other ways and other types of evidence so that people create kind of a portfolio that demonstrates their teaching effectiveness and teaching excellence. And the handbook goes on to give a lot of examples, things like peer evaluations and course materials and special contributions, innovative teaching materials, special teaching activities outside of the university. There are lots of things that people can do to demonstrate their effectiveness and excellence in teachers that are more direct than TEVALs are. So TEVALs is part of this equation, but in my opinion, it's a relatively small part. The University Handbook also allows faculty members to submit their own methods of providing supplemental student views. So if you have a course reflections report or something like I do in my classes, you can include that, which might be a little bit more specific and might allow for a little bit more nuance, a little bit more depth in the different experiences that your students had in your classes. I want to take a brief side note to say that TEVALs are not the only way to get student feedback. And one of the things I mentioned, course reflection reports, I'll try to find other ways in my class to get my students to tell me what it is they took away from my class, what it is they learned, what they thought the strengths and weaknesses of the teaching practices in my class were. Find other ways to do that. They won't necessarily be the TEVAL, they won't be necessarily anonymized, they won't necessarily be standardized, but it provides me information that helps me teach, which is what I think the purpose of TEVALs really is. I think the purpose of TEVALs is to give me insight into the experiences of my students, not for an external evaluator. I think that's what TEVALs are for. And mid-semester evaluations, I highly recommend, and we've talked about those in previous conversations. If you want to get the most out of your TEVALs, and when I say get the most out of your TEVALs, I mean get the biggest response rates and have that be the most productive data to help you refine your teaching practices. First of all, I want you to announce and explain the value of TEVALs to your students. Tell them why you're using them. Tell them what it's for. Tell them that you appreciate it. Let them know, for instance, as Melissa's saying, they're providing anonymous feedback to the instructor, not to external sources. Let them know the reason for this. One of the recommendations that I came across in researching for this is someone actually said too, like, maybe let them know that you've actually made course changes based on previous student feedback would let them know that they are now collaborators in this process of helping you teach the best course that you can teach. And I want you to do this in person. I want you to do this via video announcements. Our Student Governance Association has a video, and this is contained as a link in the PowerPoint slides that I've created. You can show this to your students. And basically, it's students from student government talking to other students about the importance of teaching evaluations and taking them seriously, treating them professionally, and treating them constructively. Yeah, some students might think TEVALs are how to get someone fired when they think the teacher's not good. TEVALs are a way to help us be the best teachers we can be. I don't think they're really the ways to get people fired. And I hope our students aren't thinking that. And I think that SGA video goes a little further in showing them that. But this is something I would also convey to my students, what they're for and how they're used. I want my students to collaborate with me. I want my students to kind of look at this as an endeavor that we've now taught for 4 months together. What did you learn from me? And what can you help me to teach my next cohort of students in the same class? I want to bring them in. I want to help them, make them their experiences as valuable for me as possible in making my classes as good as they can be. I have a sample message that I provided in my PowerPoints that I use in the text when I create my online TEVALs. And this is for my general psychology class, that Psych 110 class. It basically says, hey, everyone, this is an invitation to complete the student evaluations, the TEVALs, for Psych 110 this semester. I loved ordering with you this semester, and I really appreciate hearing your feedback about the course. I tell them I take these very seriously. I want to know what worked and what didn't. I want to know what to keep doing and what I should stop or change. I want to hear about your experiences in 110. And then I say, click the link and complete the TEVAL. I'm letting them know I want to hear both sides. I want to hear the things that you want me to keep doing, and I want to hear about the things that I should do less or I should change. And ideally, if you know how to change it, tell me how to change it. Help me make that revision. The best way to increase response rates, and this will only work in synchronous classes, is to give time in class for completion. So let them know we're going to do the TEVALs on, Thursday, December, whatever. Bring a laptop, bring a phone, something like that. We're going to have the online TEVAL, and I'm going to give you time in class to complete that. Have them access the TEVAL, you step outside the room, and then they can complete that. If you have attendance in your class, this is the #1 way to boost the response rate of those online TEVALs. If you leave it for out of class, there are other things that can distract the student. They can lose track of it. I know I lose track of things all the time, might fall off their to-do list, and they might not end up doing it. But if you give them class time toward the end of the semester, this is the #1 way to increase response rates. This doesn't work in asynchronous classes. I apologize for that. But for synchronous classes, this is our #1 recommendation. Do not give incentives or extra credit. The interpretation of the handbook, the way that admin looks at it, is that to give extra credit, there's a couple ways this could happen. #1, student says, I did the TEVALs, and you give them extra credit. Now you know they did the TEVALs, and you know other students didn't. This can potentially introduce potential biases in there. So this is not great. The other ways people have sometimes done it is to say, I'm going to have 80%. If 80% of you do the TEVALs and everyone gets extra credit requirement, I personally have an issue with that because it means now my grade is dependent on someone else's behavior. But I'll say that basically incentives and extra credit for TEVALs, kind of not consistent with our handbook. I highly recommend, though, when you're setting up your TEVALs, is use supplemental items for your class. The TEVAL as a standard survey instrument has some decent questions, and there are going to be things that instructors across the university are going to have asked about their classes, but I don't think the comparison is really the most important part for me, because I don't think the comparison is appropriate. What I'm more interested in is finding out ways for this to be a data collection instrument for my class that is going to help me. I also find that when I provide supplemental items that get at the things I really want to hear about, it provides organization for students' responses. If a student just says, hey, this class was great, or hey, I hated this class, it doesn't tell me why it was great and didn't tell me what they hate. But if I have questions that are specifically about my assessments or my teaching practices or my interactions or availability with students or whatever, I'm now getting the information that is going to help me refine my teaching practices. So I'm going to treat this as a targeted data collection. One way that you can potentially do this is, and this I got from Tucker Jones, he said this 3-question kind of orientation. And I now actually do this as part of my mid-semester evaluations, but you can do this mid-semester or at the TEVAL, is the things your students liked, the things your student didn't like that you can't change. So this might be something like the time of day or the temperature in the room, that they're venting, but they understand it's not your fault. And then might be things that students didn't like that you can change. And ideally here, they're going to give you some constructive feedback. And I'm sorry, I'm reading in the chat, a couple of you have questions. Someone asked, what percentage of response do you need to make them statistically valid? With the online administration, and this is not a hard firm number, but if you're probably getting, a third to half, that's probably the minimum you would probably need. And I realize that's not a lot. Anything over about half is going to be considered a good response rate right about now. And obviously, if you have a smaller class, those numbers would have to be a little bit higher. So I'm kind of speaking like if I'm teaching a 100-person class and I get a third to half, that's probably going to be about par for the course. Anything over half is going to be about good. If I'm teaching a very small seminar class, we'd expect probably higher response rates for those to be more valid. Someone asked if the position for TEVALs, they should be used for evaluating teaching alone. Why are departments allowed to do this if they're supposed to collect more than just TEVALs? This is amplified even more so for teaching versus tenured faculty. My experiences, my annual evaluations are really boiled down to the 1 overall effectiveness number. This is something that the handbook says we cannot do, and our promotion, tenure, and merit evaluation document should have guidance on what we should be doing to create that information. I know mine does, and I know that several of the others across our university do. So I would recommend you check out your document, your promotion, tenure, merit evaluation document. It should have specific guidance in there. And if not, our university handbook absolutely does. And I provided you the link that you can use for that. It should not boil down to your overall effectiveness number. I use a lot of targeted questions for data collection in my class to make the TEVALs as valuable for me as they can be. I ask my students, for instance, how much progress they're making toward their student learning outcomes in my class. So do they think they're learning? It's not as a direct measure as actually evaluating their learning, but I do think their perceptions of learning are interesting to me. I might look at their perceptions of specific exams. Did the exam work for you? Was it fair? Did you like this assignment? Did you express your learning well in the final project? These would be things that I might look at in my class. I might ask about perceptions of specific teaching practices. I might ask, do I bring peace? Peace is a big part of my teaching philosophy, preparation, expertise, authenticity, caring, and engagement. I might ask how well I teach each of those 5 things. I might ask how inclusive my teaching was, how welcome I was of all students, how welcome I was of diverse viewpoints in my class. These might be things that I might include. And I might then also have some supplemental items if it's a team taught course, or if I have a graduate teaching assistant, I might have specific items for their performance versus mine, so we can kind of disentangle those when we're trying to figure out who did what and what our students felt about our experiences with each of us. In that PowerPoint, I have lots of other examples of items that I use. I highly recommend you check those out. If any of those work for you, steal them. If they don't work for you and you don't want to use them, that's great. But if any can be adapted for you, absolutely use them. These are ones that I've had some luck with, I think, in making my teaching evaluations from students more valuable and finding me the data that I want. Now, when I get my TEVALs back, I'm going to use them to inform decisions. TEVALs are data, and data have to be interpreted. I am not going to change something just because one student told me to change something. I'm going to look at what the student thought. I'm going to think about why they thought it. Did I not provide enough context for that? Was that an issue with the structure of the class? Did I have too many things scheduled at once? I'm going to try to figure out why they thought that. And then I'm going to consider if that's consistent with my course objectives and my teaching philosophies. Is that a revision worth making? And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. And what I will do is I will typically tweak. I don't overhaul my classes based on TEVALs, and I don't chase TEVALs. When I say don't chase TEVALs, what I mean by that is I don't take every single comment as a directive that I must fulfill, because what happens is an idiosyncratic student's comment and their idiosyncratic experience in my class might lead them to suggest something that doesn't work for the rest of the students. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to try to just change everything the way that someone told me to do it. I'm going to evaluate it in the context of the course and make the best decision that I can. So I'm going to kind of provide the conclusion of my thoughts at this point, and I want to have a little bit more conversation. But in conclusion, teaching evaluations, the way that TEVALs do it, and other student and we'll also have those slides that Ashley has put in the chat. We'll have those available for us on the TLC website before. And I have no idea what is possessing my computer and my online office space or whatever it is that made the text so unreliable today. And I completely apologize for that. But what questions, comments, concerns do you want to talk about in voice now?
And this is just curiosity,
Yeah.
More than anything, is why do we set up our own TEVALs? I've never been at a school where the instructors do it. It's usually the department that sets that up. And I'm wondering why we do it that way here.
I don't know the answer for sure, but my guess would be to allow the flexibility I've kind of talked about in determining the dates, creating the messaging, creating the supplemental questions, and those kind of things. So I think it was probably to empower us as instructors, but I don't know that for sure. Someone asked, how do we explain that TEVALs are primarily for us to improve instruction when they are viewed by external sources as well? I would still argue they are primarily used for us by instruction, to help us with instruction. So the fact that we share them for other purposes, I think is a little bit tangential to their primary use. And my role is Teaching and Learning Center, right? I'm trying to promote Teaching and Learning Center here at K-State. I think that we use these to promote teaching and learning. That is their primary goal, in my opinion. And when we are doing that well, that's great. When we're not doing that well, the TEVALs might be a way for us to let us know how to potentially change that and to identify those issues. If you want to let your students know these are reviewed by external sources, that's fine. But I do agree, and I don't think we're lying when we say it, that their primary goal is to help us as instructors to be good instructors. Someone asked, when historically were teaching evaluations first introduced and what was used to evaluate teaching before that time? I don't know when they were first historically introduced. I think the first evaluations of teaching were peer observations, or it wasn't even peer observation, it was supervisor observations, where people will come and watch you. And that is something, you know, the university handbook allows this as one of those other things. People find that intimidating to have someone kind of sit in their class and provide constructive feedback. We talked about this a little bit in our teaching chat last week, but I think it was direct observation was probably the way that would happen. Now, in my opinion, the single best way to evaluate teaching effectiveness is demonstrations of student learning. What did your students learn? Did they learn impressive things? Did they learn things that are consistent with the student learning outcomes of the course? If they did, then your class did what it was supposed to do. That's probably the single best indicator, in my opinion, of teaching effectiveness, is showing that your students learned. I don't know why that is not a bigger component of much of what we do to evaluate teaching. Let's see, Ashley said, also, who are those external sources? Who can see my TEVALs and does it depend on my position? Okay, your TEVALs are yours. No one sees them unless you give them to them. So what happens is you will receive your TEVALs, you get that online report, but typically department guidelines and for tenure promotion merit evaluations will then obligate you those to share with the department head. They do not get them directly. You must supply them to them. So what they will typically do is share them with a tenure promotion committee. Maybe it goes to Dean's Council if you survive, you know, kind of your department's tenure promotion committee or something like that. But you control who gets to see them in line with those other procedures. They don't see them automatically without you sharing them proactively. Someone said, what is an example of a TEVAL comment you received that has impacted your instruction the most? There are a couple. My favorite historical TEVAL comment was Donnie Boy is a cocky prick. And what makes that my favorite comment was they were picking up some of the fact that early on in my teaching career, I felt it was kind of necessary to be super knowledgeable and almost intimidating and overwhelming in your knowledge. And I realized that maybe wasn't coming off for the student. The Donnie Boy stuff bothered me because that's completely disrespectful. But that comment kind of stuck with me. But some that were actually a little bit more kind of proactive in changing my teaching strategies is I once had a couple of students tell me that I answered questions too fast. And this is actually something we're talking about in my Etsy class this week. I basically, someone asked a question, I belt out the answer real quick. And they actually took that as kind of insulting, that the question must have been really, really easy if I knew the answer that quickly. And what it kind of made me think of is that teaching is not just about getting information out as efficiently as possible. Because I thought if I do it fast, I can answer more questions. It's about actually supporting your students as learners. And that really kind of stayed with me. And now what happens when students will ask questions in my class, I'll often kind of go, you know, that's a really good question. And that makes me think that the theory could be applied that way, but maybe. And then what I'll do is I'll give the answer that I thought of immediately. And now what happens is when I answer questions, I go through a 4-step process where I smile, breathe, think, talk. And this has really kind of changed the way that I'm now respecting my students more for asking questions. The other TEVAL comments, because sometimes if you get the TEVAL comment enough, you take the students at their word. I had students in my general psychology class say that my class was worth 100 points at that point, the whole class, 100 points, and the exams were something like 15 points. So it's 15% for each of the exams. And the students said they wish the exams were worth more points. And they wish there were more points in the class. I'm sorry, they didn't want the exams to be worth more points. They wanted more points in the class. And what I thought is they wanted more ways to earn points. I didn't think they wanted more points. I thought they wanted more way to earn points. And eventually I took them at their word because they kept saying it. They want more points in the class. So I eventually said, all right, it's not a 100-point class. It's now a 1,000-point class. And the exams that were previously 15 points are now 150 points. And I didn't change anything else. And what happened is students were then fine. They really told me psychologically it was hard for them to motivate for study for an exam that was only worth 15 points, but they could study for the same exam, same proportional exam if it was worth 150. And that was just kind of, and I have colleagues who study things like numerical literacy and those kind of things. So this is a real thing. But it's something where sometimes if there's an easy switch that's not going to interfere with my teaching practices, sometimes it might work. Someone said it really should not be called teaching evaluations, but students teaching evaluations, or better yet, students ratings of teaching. And naming the form TEVALs really carries a wrong subliminal message. So why don't we change that? That's a decision made above my pay grade, but I agree with you on that sentiment. And Melissa says, I remember you saying this, I'm in my classes based on 1,000 points instead of 100 for that reason. Yeah, it's going to be really easy to study for Melissa's exams. They're going to worth tons of points in that class. What other questions or comments that you want to share or kind of ask about? Because someone said anxiety provoking for TEVALs. It is anxiety provoking. I've been teaching for a really long time. I'm a full professor. I'm a University Distinguished Teaching Scholar. I'm faculty associate director of the Teaching and Learning Center. I'm doing a decent job in the classroom. But when I open those TEVALs on that Wednesday morning after the semester ends, I am terrified. I am terrified to see what students are going to say. What I will say is using those supplemental questions to kind of organize their responses. I don't get inappropriate comments very often anymore at all. It's more often they're going to say, this was the thing, this was the thing, this was the thing. And they're going to give me comments that fit into those various components and domains of my classes. But I am always terrified. And I think it's just anytime we receive feedback on something that is really, really important to us, it's going to create that anxiety. Someone said, I filled out surveys everywhere and students just get tired of responding to them. How do we combat this? One alternative to some of the procedure that I'm talking about here is you use kind of the more extensive collection of data about your teaching in the form of a course reflection report or a class assignment or something like that, and keep the TEVAL a little bit more bare bones and streamlined. That's one option. And then that would actually kind of de-emphasize the TEVALs a little bit. Someone asked, you recommend including the standard TEVAL questions on mid-semester evaluation. Someone said, I did this, but I'm not sure whether it'll help or hurt. My mid-semester evaluations, I typically don't have that many quantitative ratings. I typically focus more on qualitative free response feedback, but you absolutely could use the TEVAL questions if you wanted to. If you're going to do that, you'd have to put it into Qualtrics. You can't use the TEVAL system at the mid-semester point because you only get one of those a semester. Julio, I see your hand.
Yeah, I was going to ask, I know you have a lot of experience teaching. To me, you're a wonderful teacher. So I was wondering, what has been your worst evaluation and how you cope with it?
Yeah, my worst evaluation is a cohort, and this is one that hurt my heart. It was a CAT community class that I taught a couple of years ago. It was in my psych prejudice class, which I've been teaching for a really long time. And just one year, it just did not go well. And there's something called hyperbonding that can happen in really small intensive classes where the students kind of band together and they connect really well. And what had happened is in my 1 credit class, they were doing an independent research project. And it was set up so they, homework every week, and it was iterative and the assignment scaffold. And it was, in my opinion, a really nicely designed course. But what happened is the students had heard from, other students that there shouldn't be any homework in a 1 credit class. So what happened is, and that's not consistent with my understanding of what a 1 credit class is, but they had heard that there shouldn't be homework in a 1 credit class. So what happened is, I didn't know this, but they kind of elected someone to be their spokesperson in a class. And the spokesperson came in and said, hey, we think that we shouldn't have to do all this work. And I said, I'm sorry, it's a 1 credit class. That means that you can get 2 or 3 hours of homework outside of class, completely consistent with university handbook, academic expectations. I'm sorry. And they said, well, other classes don't get homework in their 1 credit class. And I'm sorry, well, you took this one. And what happened is they then collaborated on the TEVALs to destroy me. And what happened, I got by far the lowest numerical ratings I had ever had. I had the same comments from almost every student where they talked about the class was completely unfair and unreasonable. And it hurt my heart because they did excellent work. Their projects were amazing. It was some of the best things I've ever seen students produce in a class, combined with the worst student perception data in that class. And it destroyed me because I was looking, like, look how far you came. Look how well we did together. Look what you demonstrated. Look what you learned. But they just reported these super negative experiences, and it absolutely just destroyed me. And to be honest, I had a hard time coming back that next semester to teach that class. It was really something where I poured so much of my time and energy into designing what I thought would be this amazing experience for them. and we just were on different pages. And I had done that before and after with the same standards and the same things, and other cohorts had great experiences with that, but this singular cohort did not. So yeah, that would be my answer there. And it was funny because I had my annual evaluation meeting, and my department head was like, "What happened?" It was kind of just such an exceptional kind of thing if you look at the rest. And I brought in the demonstrations of student work. I brought in the demonstrations of student learning, and I said, "Look what they did." And he's like, "Oh my God, that's amazing." And I said, "Yeah, it's just the student perception data was not in line with that."
Thank you.
Someone asked, so what is a course reflection? Do you provide links to more info about this in your PowerPoint? If not, can you tell us a little bit more about this? So for me, a course reflection is I want them to go back and kind of do, what are the top things they learned in the class? What are the things that were most interesting? What are the questions they still have? What were the moments they would like me to try to replicate in future classes? And I have a number of other questions that I'll ask. And what I'll try to do is I'll try to find an example of this, and we'll include this as some of the materials that we'll post along with this, this recorded presentation. But it's basically all the things that I want to know that they learned from my class. One of the things is, what is their homework for life? I'm a big fan of homework for life because I want my class not to end, with the final exam. I want my class to continue. I want the learning to continue. So their homework for life is, what are they going to assign themselves as a task that they're going to continue to perform, a responsibility to put on themselves moving forward in their worlds, in their society, in their personal and professional lives. So that's what I'm looking for in terms of course reflections is, what are you going to take away? What did you learn? What are the best parts? What are the worst parts? What are the topics you want me to eliminate? What are topics I should include that I didn't? So it's a little bit more specific to the specific content. I sometimes give them class time to work in groups. Sometimes I have them do it individually. But I find that those are super valuable in me finding out what worked for them and what stood out to them. And I often find that on the basis of those course reflections, something that was a really small part of my class becomes a larger part because I didn't realize the power that it had on several of my students. That's a great question. Thank you for that. Are there any additional questions? We are almost out of time here.
Like maybe a larger question that's maybe too big for this forum,
Sure.
but I'm thinking about how can we use our TEVALs or even the faculty information form in the TEVALs to document how student expectations are changing from the pandemic, because I feel like every semester they feel different now. My students feel very different from before the pandemic, but each semester feels different as well. And I'm not sure how to document that in a way that might be useful, or getting information from them to help improve the class for the next semester.
If you can think of a supplemental item that kind of helps, like how distracting was the outside world? Like how many other things were you burdened by in my class? That might provide some context quantitatively. But in that faculty information form, there is that free response field where you can put what you felt. You can say, I felt this class had unusual numbers of crises they were dealing with in the class. I felt that the class had an extraordinary heavily workload compared to other cohorts that I've taught. So you can put that in there, but you can also collect data on that there too. And then you can track that data semester to semester if you'd like. Someone said, our course reflection is administered through TEVAL. Additional questions, are they completely separate from TEVAL? The way that I do course reflections are completely separate for TEVAL. I usually have it through Qualtrics or Canvas. And Melissa asked, Noah and Ashley, what might you be willing to share about your perspectives on TEVALs?
Yeah, thank you for asking, Melissa. I think the very first time that I ever got TEVALs, I was super scared, very intimidated. Kind of that's the only thing that was kind of consuming me that last week of class and in the first part of the week after finals week. But kind of conceptualizing them the way we've talked about in this talk, that they are just one form of kind of getting information about your class and supplementing it with lots of other ways to get information about how you are as a teacher has been really helpful. And I feel less intimidated kind of going forward, more semesters to get under my belt.
Yeah, I feel very similarly. I also am very honest with my students, and they know I'm a grad student. I say, this is something I want to do for a living, so please be honest. I'm very feedback oriented. I want to continue to improve and make this experience better for me and future students. So please be constructive. And so far they have. I'm hoping that continues this semester as well.
So I'm going to conclude by saying, and we'll have a post-event survey for you to complete. We'll drop that in the chat. Next week, Fred Burak's going to come and talk about assessment. It's going to be awesome, and we'll archive this this presentation later. But I'll end by talking about TEVALs or student perception data huge limitations, should not be used exclusively, are often not used the way that they should be used, but they are very informative for us. I think that's their primary use. And I think there's some things we can do to make them even more valuable. And I've talked about those today. If people have questions, want to continue this conversation, please reach out. I know this is something that gives us a lot of anxiety, as we've discussed, but I want this to be seen as something that is helpful moving forward. So as always, thank you so much for being part of the TLC's professional development series. I really enjoyed talking with you today. No idea what's going on with the tech, kind of freaking me out for other talks I've got later this week. But we will see you next Wednesday at noon, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.